story of South Africa is rather complex and it's made out of four colonies which were under the domination of the British Empire. This union was formed in the year of 1910. Founded in 1912, the Native National Congress gave birth to the Native Lands Act, which gave only 7.3% of the country's land to Africans, who made up 80% of the population. The Union of South Africa's Parliament enacts the Status of Union Act, which declares the country to be a sovereign independent nation state. The British Parliament henceforth loses all its authority over the state. However, it is now that more than 75,000 African mine workers went on strike because they were being paid 12 times lesser than their white counterparts. And this is where apartheid legally entered the state of South Africa, wherein the population was segregated according to their racial schemes and lands were distributed accordingly. Laws such as the Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act and the Population Registration Act were enacted. Through this time in the 50s, a number of legislative acts were implemented to maintain the white government's rule over the majority blacks in the state. In 1960, the Sharpeville Massacre was one of the most public displays of apartheid, wherein the police opened fire at a crowd of blacks, killing 69 of them. It is in 1961 that South Africa was declared a republic, whilst ANC leader Nelson Mandela reaches out to the masses for their civil disobedience movement against apartheid. He garnered major support from the UN for this end. However, the apartheid laws were already so strong that more than 3 million people had to forcibly resettle back into black homelands in the nation state. However, it is in 1989 that Frederick William Burke is elected president, who works extensively to repeal apartheid laws and international sanctions on South Africa. An interim constitution is formed and elections are held, monitored heavily by UN international observers. ANC leader Mandela, who spent 27 years in jail, is now elected president in 1994.
Before we look at our case study, let us revise a few important concepts. Nationalism is an ideological movement for the attainment and maintenance of autonomy, unity, and identity of a human population, some of whose members conceive it to constitute an actual or potential nation. Xenophobia is the fear or hatred of foreigners or strangers. It is embodied in discriminatory attitudes and behavior and often culminates in violence, abuses of all types, and exhibitions of hatred. Studies on xenophobia have attributed such hatred of foreigners to a number of causes: the fear of loss of social status, identity, a threat perceived to be real of citizens' economic success, a way of reassuring the national self and its boundaries in time of national crisis, a feeling of superiority, and poor intercultural information. Now let's move on to ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is the view of things in which one's own group is the center of everything and all others are scaled and rated in reference to one's group. Ethnocentrism is simply summarized as in-group preference, solidarity, and out-group rejection or aversion. The question that now arises is, what is the role of nationalism in causing xenophobia in African nations? The first phase of nationalism in African states happens in the process of decolonization. It was directed against colonial powers, which meant against other states. This second nationalism is, as a rule, no longer directed towards other countries, but against denizens or non-citizens, which live within an African state. So this kind of nationalism is directly related to internal xenophobia. The inclusiveness of the beginning of independence is gone. Now the exclusion of social groups within the same society defines the new nationalism. The main reasons for new nationalism lie within the process of globalization and in growing national inequalities. In the international perspective, Africa is still a continent with low level of urbanization. However, African countries now face strong internal and external migration. In the last decade, African migration figures have skyrocketed. The increase of the urban population is much higher than in other continents. In some countries, this was caused by push effects such as civil war and ecological catastrophes. But there are several economic reasons too. In European countries, it is often overlooked that economically more advanced and politically stable countries in Africa are more frequently seen as targets for migrants than European countries. So economic inequalities within the African continent can be seen as the most important factor for continental migration. The economic hegemons in Africa have a long tradition of attracting the African labor force. The new question seems to be, who has citizenship, but who should not have it, and who should have it but does not have it? Citizenship is seen as a key factor. Rights to social welfare, to employment, to land are increasingly denied to newcomers and immigrants.
It is ever since 1994 that xenophobia has been increasing in South Africa. Now, one can point it down to employment, education, but however, nobody has really been able to point out why exactly xenophobia has been increasing in South Africa. According to most of the youth of the country, it is because their opportunities in the country have been depleting because of the immigrants who are coming in inside the state. Now, a lot of them are also other Africans who are coming in. However, it's not exactly apartheid anymore. It's not their battle against the white. It's not a black against white anymore. It's exactly what you think it is. It is the fact that their opportunities have been taken away every single time. The youth has been extremely angry about how other immigrants, irrespective of their racial orientation, have been coming in the state and taking away their job, their education, and their any other opportunities for resources in the nation states for a while now. For the next video, we shall be recognizing the different reactions to these xenophobic actions. It is important to note for us that there is a part of the youth that are the perpetrators. The different reactions to these xenophobic actions in the nation state. While there are ministers who claim that these are only criminal actions and they are not xenophobic actions whatsoever, it is important for us to note that there is a youth segment of the youth that is extremely against the immigrants who are coming inside the nation state. Let them be blacks or whites as their racial orientation. They do not care. So the question now is it just insecurity that is xenophobia now?